personality as a man, as a simple servant of God, and as a humble person who lived all his life among his brothers, followers, and enemies as a true man. In this regard, I have chosen a few facets of his real life and will share them with you, for you to judge how close to humans, yet how vastly different he was. Why I said that being Abd was more important is because I believe that the prophecies of a prophet are always being disputed by the enemy. At one end, the prophet is close to his God, and at the other, he is close to humanity. The humans cannot directly judge the authenticity of his claim of being from God, but they most certainly can judge him as a human. If as a man he is true, it is impossible for him to be a false prophet. Again I quote Bosworth Smith, who in turn quotes Sir William Muir in the following words. Muhammad was of middle height and of a strongly built frame. His head was large, and across his ample forehead and above finely arching eyebrows ran a strongly marked vein, which when he was angry would turn black and throb visibly. His eyes were coal black and piercing in their brightness. His hair curled slightly, and a long beard, which, like other Orientals, he would stroke when in deep thought, added to the general impressiveness of his appearance. His step was quick and firm, like that of one descending a hill. Page 83. Bosworth Smith, in the 1874 edition of his book Muhammad and Mohammedanism, writes about his character in the following words. He was a man of few words and good faith. They called him Al-Amin, the trusty. His tending his employer's flocks, his journeys to Syria, possibly his short-lived friendship there with Sergius or Bahira, an Nestorian monk, his famous vow to succor the oppressed, his employment by Khadijah in a trade venture, and his subsequent happy marriage with her are about the only noteworthy external incidents in his early life. Page 75. However, in the 1986 edition of the same book, published long after his death, we see how this has been changed. Hitherto a man of few words and with few friends, he was yet noble with his own small circle of truthfulness and good faith. Men called him Al-Amin, or the trusty. A rich widow named Khadijah employed him to go on some trading journeys for her to Syria. The shepherd became a camel driver, and the trust committed to him he discharged with such fidelity and prudence that Khadijah offered him her hand in marriage. She, some 15 years older than he, old enough, that is, in that eastern climate, to be his mother. Yet the marriage was one of real affection and respect, and from that time to the day of her death, a period of 24 years, Muhammad remained faithful to her and took no second wife, though the universal custom of his countrymen would have countenanced him in so doing. Pages 95 and 96. Describing his early life, Carlyle tells us in his book, "But from an early age he had been remarked as a thoughtful man. His companions named him Al-Amin, the faithful, a man of truth and fidelity, true in what he did, in what he spake and thought. They noted that he always meant something. A man rather taciturn in speech, silent when there was nothing to be said, but pertinent, wise, sincere when he did speak, always throwing light on the matter. This is the only sort of speech worth speaking. Through life we find him to have been regarded as an altogether solid, brotherly, genuine man, a serious, sincere character, yet amiable, cordial, companionable, jocose even. A good laugh in him withal. There are men whose laugh is as untrue as anything about them, who cannot laugh. One hears of Mahomet's beauty, his fine, sagacious, honest face, brown, florid complexion, beaming black eyes. I somehow like, too, that vein on the brow, which swelled up black when he was in anger." Pages 287 and 288. Prophet Muhammad had lived among his people for 40 years before he was commissioned by God as a prophet. Even the severest critics of his character cannot put a finger on any blemish in his life up to that age. There is no dissension or disagreement among historians regarding this fact. As such, the Holy Quran challenged those who rejected him by saying, "Of course I have lived among you throughout my life before this. Why don't you use your wisdom?" Holy Quran, chapter 10, verse 17. Do you not see that a man who lived 40 years of blameless life suddenly cannot turn into the most wanton man on earth? He who never spoke a lie about his fellow beings, how could he dare speak lies about his Creator, the God he loved so much? Chapter 3. Early Life and Beginning of Prophethood. Khadijah was referred to earlier as his employer. She was the rich lady who sent him on a trade mission up to Syria. He was found to be always successful in these assignments. But I believe there was another part of this trade which was the most successful of all, but is usually omitted from being mentioned. When Khadijah ultimately married him, he was a man of 25, whereas she had already passed her youth and was 40 years of age. Despite this age difference, when she proposed, he accepted and lived with her for another 25 years. After this marriage had taken place, knowing his dignity and character, Khadijah offered him her entire property and gave him everything she had. The trade I mentioned as the most honorable, most wonderful, and the most successful was this. Having received all that wealth and property, he distributed it entirely to the destitute, without keeping a penny for himself. It is also a great tribute to Khadijah, who being the richest woman of Arabia, suddenly became one of its poorest, and never raised an eyebrow, living the rest of her life most faithfully with Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. She was in love with the man who had not yet emerged as a prophet. However, it was not the outward charm of that man, but his inward beauty, sparkling like a jewel, which she was in love with. This became evident when the holy founder of Islam received his first message from God. He was so completely shaken by its force that he returned home trembling as if a fever was about to take hold of him. Khadijah thought he was about to fall ill and loaded him with blankets. Later he told her about the experience he had of an angel appearing in the form of a man and commanding him to recite. He was fearful about himself, entirely shaken. He could not fathom what was happening to him. Khadijah, on hearing this, addressed him and said, "I have known you for some time, and I know you look after the requirements of the needy and share their miseries. You are a person who carried the burdens of those whose backs are broken under the load of afflictions. You are restoring the virtues which have disappeared from the earth. You are kind and considerate to relations, and observe the very best conduct in relationships. You are true and always have been so. How could God let you go to waste? I believe in what you have seen." It was purity of the man within him which convinced his wife that he was a true prophet. As such, she became the first believer in the holy founder of Islam and realized that it was impossible for a true man to emerge as a false prophet. Bosworth Smith has related this incident in his own words and says, "Allah will not suffer thee to fall to shame. Hast thou not been loving to thy kinsfolk, kind to thy neighbors, charitable to the poor, faithful to thy word, and ever a defender of the truth?" Page 78. In contrast to the attitude of Khadijah, the opinion of all his friends was suddenly transformed after he declared himself to be a messenger from God. Those who used to call him Al-Amin, the most trustworthy, who went to him for resolving their disputes and who trusted him entirely, started blaming him as guilty of extreme falsehood. Bosworth Smith records his contradictory attitude of the Meccans after Prophet Muhammad's pronouncement of being commissioned from God in the following words. People pointed the finger of scorn at him as he passed by. There goeth the son of Abdullah, who hath his converse with the heavens.